I'm George. I'm the pastor here at the gathering. Great to have you today. Before we jump into the message, one of the things we want to be here at the gathering is a friendly church. And friendship takes practice, like we saw a few weeks ago. So here's how it's going to go. I want you to turn around, and I want you to greet someone, and I want you to ask them what their name is. And this is just practice, so even if you know what their name is, I want you to ask them what their name is. No, don't do it yet. I'll tell you in a second. All right, you're going to turn around, you're going to greet someone, you're going to say, "Hi, my name is," and then you're going to say, "What's your name?" Right? And then one of the things that happens when we ask somebody their name is we immediately forget what it was. Anybody ever had that experience? Right? And then like 30 seconds into the message or into the conversation, you're like, "Oh, what was their name?" And since you're, hopefully you're a Christian. If you're not, we can rectify that today. But since you're Christian, you always have the default of brother or sister, right? So, hey, brother, right? And then, 5 years later, you're still calling that person brother or sister, and you never know their name, and it always feels awkward, and so you never build a friendship because a person's first name is the key to a friendship. It's what opens up the opportunity to be friends. If you don't know their name, you're never going to be their friend, right? So what we're going to do is you're going to turn around someone you didn't come with, okay? So it can't be your spouse. You don't practice on your spouse. You're right? Someone and you might have to get up and move a little bit. It's okay. You're going to say, "Hi, my name is." Say, "Hi, my name is." And you're going to say, "What's your name?" And then the third thing you're going to do is say their name, and "It's nice to meet you." And then last thing is you're going to ask them, "How did you end up coming to the gathering today?" So this is going to actually take like a minute, right? So you're actually going to have to interact for about a minute. I won't make it go longer so it doesn't get like super awkward, right? It's just going to be a little awkward, but it's good practice, okay? You ready? Go. All right, you got about 30 seconds to finish up. 30 more seconds. All right, let's wrap it up. That's all. For all you introverts, that's all the extroverts that are still talking. All right, let's go ahead and turn your attention back forward, please. You have your attention back. Great job, great job. It's funny, you can always tell who the introverts are, right? Because they're like, the extroverts are like, "Yay," right? I get to go meet people. How exciting. I saw some overachievers like going around to like 2 or 3 different people. So that's great. So at the end of the message today, I want to see if the quiz for today is at the end of the message, when it's time to go, if you can turn to that person and say, "Hey, person's name, it was great meeting you today," okay? So at the end of the message, it'll be a repeat for you. Try to see if you can remember. If you don't remember, actually, let's do this. Let's practice not remembering, okay? So this is what you do when you don't remember, is you say, hey, it was great to meet you. Remind me of your name again. So you don't get to say, even if you're a skilled person at remembering names, I want you to practice not remembering. So kind of get over that uncomfortableness of it, okay? At the end of the message, I want you to turn, and I'll remind you at the end of the message, I want you to turn and say, hey, remind me your name again, right? Just so we get in that practice so it doesn't feel awkward. It's way more respectful to say that than to pretend like you do when you don't, okay? So just learn to be honest with people. Well, hey, we're going to be continuing our series on biblical worldview. We're calling it Reimagine, trying to re-look at life through a biblical lens. We've been examining kind of the filters that we look at life through. Are they secular? We're asking, are the filters I perceive things, are they secular filters or are they biblical filters? Right? And it's been this challenging idea because we don't really realize how much we have secular filters. So I want to start with a verse out of Colossians. It's Colossians 2:8, and it says, see to it that no one, say no one, no one takes you captive through hollow and deceptive philosophy, which depends on human traditions and the basic principles of this world rather than Christ. So this is my goal for this series. It's my heart for you as your pastor is that you wouldn't be a prisoner of hollow, empty philosophies that don't work the way God intended life to work. And so we're trying to examine, do I have ways of thinking about life that are based on human tradition and the ways the world operates rather than on Christ and His Word? That's the whole goal of this, okay? So that leads to this picture that we've been painting that Jesus tells us, right, that there's a road that life kind of has like two lanes. It has a lane that will lead you to life and a lane that will lead you to destruction. And your worldview keeps you in one of those two lanes. I keep using this idea because I was so impressed with it when I rented that new car when I went up to Sacramento that had driver assist technology, and it would talk. The car talked to me. I got in the car and it synced up with my iPhone. And this was kind of freaky. It said, George, where would you like to go? And I was like, how does it know my name? Right? And then, as I'm driving, I get a little distracted sometimes. People were calling. And as I started to move towards a lane, it actually pushed me back into my lane. Anybody had the car that does that? It's a little freaky the first time it happens, right? And then I realized it's not going to let me change lanes unless I signal, right? This is like driver training through a car. But our worldview functions like that. It really is what informs us about the destination that we're heading towards. It's what nudges us back in the lane that will keep us going that direction. And so this is what we want. We want to take a look and say, are my filters keeping me in a biblical lane which will lead me to life, or are they keeping me in a secular lane that will lead to destruction? And we built kind of that whole theory and picture, and now we've been looking at different aspects of our lives to challenge the filters in those specific areas. Over the past few weeks, we've been going through relationships. We spent 4 weeks in friendship. We did dating. Last week, we talked about marriage. Today, I want to talk about parenting. All right? This is not going to be a marriage. It's not going to be a marriage. I'm already married. This is not going to be a message about how to parent. Okay, I just want to make that clear. I'm not going to give you the 9 tips to wonderful, stress-free parenting or anything like that. I know, come on. Maybe we'll do it a different day. But I want to talk about how your worldview is impacting your parenting. That's what I really want to look at today, how your worldview is impacting parenting. So whether you have kids or don't have kids, this is all about how your relationships where you nurture people. Okay, so it's going to have an application whether you got grandkids, kids, where you're hoping to have kids, where you're hoping your kids are not going to get out of your house one day. This is all about how your worldview is impacting that. Okay? The challenge with parenting, this is my hope, my goal is just to have us step back and kind of take a big picture view. But the challenge with parenting that makes it different from every other relationship is that everything we've talked about up till this point is just about us and where we're going. When we talk about parenting, we're talking about putting our kids in a lane, starting them in a lane. So this message has a far greater impact than just on your life. The way your worldview impacts your parenting will determine which lane you start your kids off in life. Now, for those of you that are freaking out right now, take a deep breath, because notice I said the word starts. Right? How we parent does not determine what lane our kids go in life, ultimately. But it does start them. One of the best insights I was given when Nan and I first started raising our kids was, remember that God gives your kids their nature. You provide the nurture, and with their free will, they'll make their own choices. And so at the very best, you're 1/3 of the equation. So you could do everything wrong, and guess what? They still turn out okay. But the opposite is true, right? You can do everything right, and they can still choose to go off the path, right? So take the stress and the pressure off yourself. There are a lot of different viewpoints on parenting. It's almost overwhelming. I Googled it this morning, and I just Googled how to be a good parent. You know how many results I got? 1,900,000 opinions online about how to be a good parent. And as I looked at it, so I thought, well, I got to narrow this down a little bit. So I said, what's the definition of parenting? And as you look at what the world thinks about parenting, it really comes down to two things: keeping your children healthy and safe, which is about their survival, right? That's kind of the first goal of parenting. Don't kill them, right? And then the second was while preparing them to be happy and productive adults. That's their thriving. So I want to keep those two words in mind because it'll be important as to which worldview that ties to, that the main goal of parenting is to help kids survive and thrive. Sounds reasonable, right? Okay, well, let's see. I got just some fun stats for you. Parenting in America, 93% of parents want to be perceived as a good parent, right? So when asked if it was important that other people, whether it was their spouse, their parents, their neighbors, their community, 93% of people said, yes, it's important to me that I am perceived as a good parent. The challenge with that is only 46% of parents actually think they're doing a good job, right? So you see the rub there? The majority of people want to be perceived, but when they're asked, are you doing a good job, only 46% actually think they're doing a good job. Only 12% of parents felt prepared for their first child. I want to know, who are those 12%? Delusional people, right? 41, when it comes to where do you get advice for parenting, 41% of people turn to mom for advice. Now, what's interesting is 50% say they turn to a parent. Then when asked which one, right? Or no, it's 42% of people say they turn to a parent. When asked who, 41% said mom. So Dad, 1% of adult children turn to us for parenting advice. They all go to mom. Now, I thought it was interesting, 20% now are looking online, which is kind of scary, because then you get your 1,900,000,000 options. 26%, this is kind of staggering, 26% of children in America are living in a single-parent home. 1 in 4 kids you see on the street only have one parent. That's the highest percentage in the world by a lot. I think England is behind us at 20%. But 1 in 4 of kids are growing up in a single-parent home. This is staggering. 80% of those homes are fatherless. 80% of those homes are fatherless. 3 concerns that are keeping people from having kids. What do you think they are? Any thoughts? Kids ruin everything. Responsibility, finances, right? So the number one right now is the high cost of childcare. High cost of childcare. People are thinking about having kids. They're thinking, I want to have a kid, but I don't want to be home with it, right? So how am I going to pay for that? Second one is lack of time to dedicate to kids, right? Like, well, I want to have a kid. I don't want to spend a lot of time. That's probably going to do some damage, so maybe I shouldn't have kids. And then fears about the future economy. All right, so with that kind of out of the way, let's look at our main passage I want to camp in today, and that's Ephesians 6, 1 through 4. Ephesians 1, 6 through 4. 6, 1 through 4. I had a long week. It says, children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment, with the promise that it may be well with you, that you may live long on the earth. And you fathers, do not provoke your children to wrath, but bring them up in the training and admonition of the Lord. Bring them up in the training and admonition of the Lord. Now, there are 2 different worldviews of parenting in this verse. 2 different worldviews. There's a distinction here between being a parent and raising a child. There's a difference between being a parent and raising a child. It's interesting, the Bible doesn't say much, actually it doesn't say anything about how to be a good parent. Nothing. But it has a lot to say about how to raise a child. And this is going to be important as we look at how am I viewing this whole idea and activity. Now, this is important because different worldviews give you a different goal. Different worldviews give you a different goal. The secular view says the goal is to be a good parent. That's why if you look up parenting, you get 1,900,000 results in 0.37 seconds. Because the world has a lot to say. The culture has a lot to say about how to be a good parent. Biblical worldview says the goal is to raise your kids God's way. Do you see the difference? One is about you, the other is about God. And it's going to depend on how you view the world as to which approach you're going to take to parenting. And this is important because different goals lead to different approaches. This is the 2-lane analogy. Okay? And I'm going to call the first one provocative parenting. A secular worldview, and I'll explain this, a secular worldview will lead to provocative parenting. Say provocative. It's just provocative, even to say provocative, right? It's just one of those words. A biblical worldview will live to biblical child raising. Biblical child raising. So let me explain provocative parenting. What does it mean to provoke? What does it mean to provoke? The word here in the Bible, fathers, don't provoke your children actually means to bring to the point of anger. To provoke someone is to bring them to the point of anger. And a provocative approach to parenting is one that consistently brings everyone in the family to the point of anger. Provocative approach to parenting is one that consistently brings everyone in the family to the point of anger. This is the devil's desire for your family. The devil wants you all mad at each other all the time. He wants you as parents to be provoking your kids to frustration and anger. He wants your kids to be provoking you to frustration and anger because James tells us, oops, I didn't put that verse in there. Let me back that up. James tells us in James 1:19, says everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to anger, because the anger of men does not bring about the righteous life that God desires. When you are angry, you can't live righteously. You get that? If you are a person that is always at the point of anger, so anger is like the next step for you in life, right? Someone cuts you off on the freeway, what's the next step? Anger, right? Your kids don't do what you want, what's the next step? Anger. Your wife, your husband doesn't do what you want, what's the next step? Anger. Politicians don't do what you want, what's the next step? Anger, right? And you're always at that place where you're ready to be provoked and you're ready to provoke. So let me show you how this works. Remember that a worldview is made up of certain beliefs, right? And I want to look at the belief and how it pertains to your view of God or existence, right? So a secular person doesn't believe in God, they believe in existence. I want to see how it pertains to your view of yourself as a parent and your view of your child. So if I have a secular worldview, when it comes to what is real, say what is real. If I'm secular, I believe that everything evolved. There is no God, right? That's my belief. That's what's real. And so as a parent, what's real? I gave life to my children, right? That's what's real, because nobody else made them. It's me. My child then belongs to me. I made them, right? They're part of the evolutionary process. When we talk about what's true, so what's real determines what we think is true. If there is no God, then I am the highest life form. That make sense? And it translates, no one goes around and says, I am the highest life form. But what it translates into is that I am the most important person in my life. Right? That flows out of this idea that if God didn't create me, I just evolved, then I am the highest life form, so I am the most important person. So as a parent, what's most important to me? Being a good parent, because I am the most important thing. The focus must be on me, and therefore my children are an extension of my life. All right? Now, from what's true, we get our understanding of what we think is good. And so, if I am the highest life form, the ultimate good is for me to survive and thrive. And so my goal for parenting is what? Survive, right? And to thrive as a parent, right? Especially when you have an infant. Anybody remember what it was like having an infant, right? Like, what's your ultimate goal? We gotta survive this, right? You tell each other, right? We'll get through this, right? We will survive. But then it transitions very quickly into this idea of This should be making my life better, right? This should be causing me to thrive, because what's most important is that I'm good, because I'm the most important thing, because no one created me. And as a result, since my kids are an extension of my life, what do I want them to do? Survive and thrive as well. Because if my kids are not doing well, what does it mean for me? I'm not doing well. And that's bad, because the most important thing is for me to do well. Right? And so we take it very personally when our kids are struggling. And so what's desired, right? Then from what's good, our desires kind of come out of what we think is good. So if I'm secular, the most desirable thing is to enjoy life and be happy. It's consistent. When you ask people, when they do these surveys, the Pew Research, Gallup poll, when they ask people, what do you want most out of life? By far and away, what's the number one response? I want to be happy, right? And it makes sense, doesn't it? If you have a secular worldview where everything evolved, you're the highest life form, the ultimate good is for you to survive and thrive, then enjoying life and being happy would make absolute sense. And so for parenting, how does that pertain to parenting? I want to feel good about being a parent. Being a parent should be increasing my enjoyment of life and my own happiness. And since my kids are an extension of myself, I would want them to feel good about themselves. And what does our culture call that? You want your kids to have high self-esteem. And what is high self-esteem? That's another term for valuing yourself above everyone else. Right? And that's what we're teaching our kids, is to value themselves above everyone else. And it makes sense, right? That especially if they have such a wonderful parent as me, they should feel good about life, right? There should be no reason why they don't feel good about life. And as parents, we tend to, we buy into this notion that every negative experience in childhood has a negative impact on self-esteem. And since our goal is for them to feel good about themselves, what do we try to do at all costs? We try to remove every negative experience from their life. It impacts the way we discipline, right? You ever see a parent in a supermarket with a melting down 4-year-old? And they're sitting there going, come on, please, I don't want to raise my voice. I don't want to have to take away your privilege or anything like that. And come on, can we just be happy? And, and you watch, and this child is just melting down, and everyone's looking at the parent saying, just smack the kid, right? Or at least take them out of this environment, because it's making our lives miserable watching your poor parenting skills, right? And the child learns that everyone around them exists to give them what they want. Fosters narcissistic emotional expressions. And that's what most meltdowns are. And sometimes it's just because they're tired or they had too much sugar. And, I took them to Grandpa's house like we did with our kids, and he gave them ice cream and Mountain Dew, right? At 9 o'clock at night, right? Okay, so yeah, they're going to melt down. This is about brain chemistry more than worldview. And then we get to finally what's chosen. What do we choose? Since the main goal of life is to enjoy it and be happy, I choose whatever brings me the greatest happiness. So my parenting style is one that makes me happy. And because my child's an extension of them, what do I want to do for them? My goal is to make them happy. And so I will choose things that make them happy. And you see this all the time, right? That Well, here's the kicker. What does this create? I want you to notice these two different columns. So this is you, this is your child. Notice that, especially as we get down to here, right? When we get down to what's good, you think for yourself, my survival and my thriving is what's good. What have you taught your child? Same thing. Because they're an extension of you. So you want them to value what you value. You want them to have the worldview you have. So they should survive and thrive. What do you want? What are you desiring from the parent-child relationship? To feel good about it, to be happy. What do they want? To feel good and be happy. And so you're choosing what makes you happy. How often, as a parent and a child, does that line up? And so what it creates is conflict. Your parenting style has created a dynamic of conflict in your life because you've created a world where both of you can rarely be happy at the same time. Two people who value themselves over everyone else with a different idea of what is good and desirable, that because they're in an interconnected relationship, then need the other person to make them happy. Typically, by doing what they want, right? So think about it. As a parent, when are you most happy? When your kids are sleeping. I would say that's the second time that we're most happy because it's neutral, right? They're not doing anything, right? They're just sleeping. But what makes us really happy is when they do what we want with a good attitude, right? That's like when we're really happy. Wow, they did what I want with, or you really want to take it to the next level when they do what we want without even being asked, because now they understand the goal of life, right? Is to make me happy, right? But that's a pretty mature approach that we're expecting from our kids. That they should understand that the goal of life is to make me happy. That's hard to get as an adult, right? And so the child in this scenario quickly learns some core beliefs. They learn that they are the most important person, or at least they will be one day. Right? They'll be, when they're an adult, they'll be able to enforce their happiness like the adults in their lives enforce their happiness. Right? So they're learning this from us. They're learning that they're the most important person. They're learning that their happiness is the ultimate good. And they're learning that the quickest way to get what they want is to challenge other people's happiness. And this is what most children are learning from a secular worldview impacted parenthood. That the quickest way to get what I want is to challenge my mom's happiness. And so when they're younger, what do they do to challenge your happiness? They whine, they cry, they scream, they kick, they hit. Right? They melt down. Have you ever seen or experienced, you don't have to raise your hand if you've experienced this, but have you ever seen a mom pick up a child that isn't getting what they want and that child rear back and smack their mom across the face? Right? And it's funny, if the first time it happens, you see this look of shock on the mom's face. Like, how could they? Right? Not understanding that their child is deeply rooted in sin. Right? And is just replaying to them what happens when their parents don't get what they want. Right? What do parents do typically when they don't get what they want? Little smack. So what do kids learn to do? Well, I'm going to try this. Works for mom. Right? And then we quickly show them that this is not your tool yet. Right? You'll get to use it one day when you're bigger and stronger than everybody else, but not now. And so this leads to a battle, a constant battle in the home of wills. James 4, if I got this verse, yeah. James 4, 1 through 2 says, what causes fights and quarrels among you? Great question, isn't it? What causes fights and quarrels? Anybody have fights and quarrels in their home? You don't have to raise your hand, right? Because if you didn't raise your hand, you just have to add lying to your list of things to repent of. Right? What causes fights and quarrels? Don't they come for your desires that battle in you? Now, think back to the chart. If you have a secular worldview, what's your ultimate desire? Your desire to be happy is what causes you to fight and quarrel. In a secular worldview, I want you to get this. When you teach your kids that the most important thing is for them to be happy, you teach them to fight and quarrel with everyone in their life. You desire but do not have, so you kill. Hopefully not your kids. You covet and cannot get what you want, so you quarrel and fight. Doesn't get clearer than that, does it? And so the family devolves into a battle of who gets their way today. You want your kids to do something that they don't want to do. Your kids want you to do something that you don't want to do. And the battle begins. Now, since you're bigger, stronger, have more money, or is the only one that can drive, right? You usually win. You usually get your way, but what are you teaching your kids? What are they lacking in life? Size. I'm not big enough yet. Right? And so you hear kids say things like, when I grow up. What does that tell them? Right? That life is unjust right now because I can't get what I want. And what I need is to be bigger and stronger, more educated, have more money, have more things, have more abilities, and that will be what will make me happy. And unfortunately for this current generation, what they've learned is the biggest threat to your happiness is kids. And so this generation is having fewer kids than any generation in the history of our country. All right? There maybe have 1, 2 max, but then it starts to get expensive. Right? Then we have to consider a different approach. And since we're not living close to family anymore, since we're a mobile society, very few people have the built-in free babysitting of grandparents. And depending if you're, unless you're my age, right, or maybe a little younger, your parents grew up being kind of selfish too. So they're putting limits on how much they'll help you with your kids, right? They're like, we need some boundaries. I've got Tuesday's my spa day, Thursday's my girlfriends, we go out, Friday's wine and book club, and so, I can take your kids from Tuesday from 9:42 to about 11:16, right? But then I've got my nail appointment, right? And they have the same worldview. It's all about what makes me happy. This is provocative parenting. A worldview, an approach to parenting that always has everybody right up to the edge of getting angry. And it doesn't take much in the family for voices to raise, tantrums to be ensued, right? Anybody? Well, you have to read. Does this relate to anybody? Are you going like, holy cow, I've got the wrong worldview, right? I need a different approach to parenting. I am a provocative parent. Well, I've got good news for you. There is something called biblical child raising. And this is what Ephesians shows us here, right? So let's look at the difference here, right? From a biblical worldview, what's real is that God made everything. Everything has a purpose. So as a parent, God gave me my children for a purpose greater than my happiness. Okay, I want you to log that in there. If you're ready to leave provocative parenting for biblical child raising, you have to understand that God created everything for a purpose. That means when he gave you your children, it was for a purpose greater than you. It was for his purposes, not yours. That make sense? Super important. I feel like some of you are like, what? My kids don't exist for me, right? My kids aren't an extension of my life. No, God has a purpose for your life. He has a purpose for your children's lives, and he gave them to you and you to them to accomplish his purposes. Okay, this is critical. Then, what's true then, if God made everything, he's Lord over everything. Say Lord over everything. Right? So I am just a steward of these children for a season. That's all I am. They don't belong to me. They're his. I'm giving them for a very short portion of their life to help accomplish God's purposes for them. Right? And so as I'm thinking about my child, I have to realize God has a purpose for them. There's a reason that they're on this planet. There's a reason they are the way they are. There's a reason they have the struggles they have. There's a reason they have the gifts that they do. It's not a reflection of me. God has a purpose for them. And this is liberating. If you can start to understand this, that God put us together as a family not for our happiness, but for his purposes. Then we talk about what's good. God made everything. He's Lord over everything. Then what's good is obeying God. And then as I think about being a parent, I see that, raising my kids is an act of obedience. Raising my kids is an act of obedience. That as I interact with my children, as I make choices about our family, I have to ask the boss, and I'm not talking about your wife, guys, right? I have to ask God, what's your purpose for our family? What are you trying to do in my life? What are you trying to do in my kids' lives? How I'm acting as a parent, right? Like you think about things like changing diapers and washing dishes and doing laundry, all these things that take so much time and they seem so meaningless until you understand that is God asking you to learn how to work out your obedience to him. That when you feed your kids, when you change their diapers, when you wash their clothes, you're saying, Jesus, you are Lord. Because you've asked me, you've given me these children to care for, and I'm going to do it out of obedience to you, regardless of how happy I am. I don't know, does anybody like laundry? Yeah. A couple people, right? It's like all right? Does anybody like changing diapers? How about that one? All right? Right? But if we can see it as this is my way to honor God. By doing it out of love and with a good attitude, sacrificing myself, my time, my sense of smell, all these things, they're a way to honor God. It becomes a beautiful thing. And then for my child, what I want for them is to learn to trust and obey God. Because that's what I'm modeling every day. That makes sense? It's not about doing what I want. They should do what God wants and trust him when they can't get what they want. Anybody ever struggle with that still as an adult? You struggle with God because you want something from him that he's not giving? I would venture to say that probably goes back to the way you were parented. That you might never have realized that often the person who loves you the most, knows you the best, and cares the deepest for you will not give you what you want. But for some reason, if we don't learn that as children, it becomes very hard to apply it as adults to God. That the person who knows us the best, loves us the most, and cares about us the deepest will sometimes keep things from us because he knows best. Way better than we do. But if we haven't learned to trust that as children, it gets hard to trust God as an adult. And that's kind of what we're doing as parents, right? We're trying to model God to our children. How God works, how life works, what the Bible actually says. That they can trust us because we're not capricious. The reason they don't trust us is because they learn early that this isn't about what's best. This is about what makes you happy. See how that works? If you take a secular approach to parenting, your kids learn that your choices are primarily based on what makes you the happiest. And so it is capricious. It does have selfish motives to it. And so then they project that onto God as they get older. God must, I can't trust God because I couldn't trust my parents to do what was the best. Now, from what's good, we get to what's desired. So if God made everything, he's Lord, obeying him is good, then what I want is to be more like Jesus, because Jesus was the most obedient person ever. He is the standard. All right, so if this is my worldview, if this is my biblical worldview, then that's what I want over being happy. That in every situation, like parenting, what would I want? To become more like Jesus as I raise my kids. I'm convinced, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that one of the reasons God gave me my kids was because I needed to be more like Jesus. And they point that out to me every single day, right? They make it very clear where I am not like Jesus, right? And then it's an opportunity, right? For me to either say, oh, I need to go back. In this situation, I need to ask myself, what would be obedience? What does the Bible say? How would Jesus react in this moment? Right? And then what I want for my kids is that they would become more like Jesus as they mature. That's what I want. It's no longer about my way or your way. It's about what's God's way. Right? And then finally, what do we choose? If I have a biblical worldview, my choices are based on what most glorifies God. Those are my choices. As a parent, I'm choosing biblical training and admonition. And children are taught to choose behavior that honors their parents because their parents are just trying to do what God wants. This make sense? Right? Do you see the difference between provocative parenting that comes from a secular worldview and instead of conflict in this family, what do you think happens? You get peace. You get peace because the battle isn't constantly happening. You and your children are actually moving in the same direction. You're teaching your children to obey and trust God because that's what you're doing. Right? It doesn't mean that there's never any conflict or there's never a battle of wills, because we got to get back here, right? When do our children become more like Jesus? What are they not? Mature. So they're not going to be like Jesus. How am I doing on time? Let's see. I had this whole section on what does it look like to raise kids, but we're out of time. So maybe I'll put the notes online or something. But I want to respect your time and give you time to I want to do one thing. Can I have 5 more minutes? You okay with 5 more minutes? Can we do one more thing? All right. Let me go through these really quick. These shouldn't be novel to you. But if you're going to raise your children, you got to understand what the Bible says about your kids, right? They're sinners by nature. You never have to teach them to be selfish. You never have to teach them to hit somebody else. right? You never have to teach them to throw a tantrum. They have that innately in them. They figure that all by themselves. But that means they're spiritually lost. They lack wisdom, and they lack faith, right? That's what our Bible says about our kids. They need salvation, right? Kids need to be saved. I'm going to skip through this because I didn't finish that slide. Kids need training. This is what I wanted to get to. The word training here in the Bible means to instruct with painful consequences. That's what this word means, to instruct with painful consequences for the purpose of moral development. Say painful consequences. Now, it doesn't have to be physically painful, right? But we all learn this lesson, right? Like dads are great at letting their kids learn naturally through painful consequences, right? They're climbing a tree. Mom's like, oh, they're going to fall. What does dad say? They'll learn, right? And that's this idea, right? That painful consequences help us learn things. And so training isn't just telling. Say training isn't telling. Training is telling them and then giving them the consequences. That's training. Instruction without consequences is not biblical training. And the consequences have to be painful. It has to be something that the kid, how do you say this? Yeah, something that is it's gonna sink in, right? It's not gonna be surfacey. It's something that's gonna sink in, right? 2 Timothy 3:16 through 17 says, all Scripture is God-breathed, useful for teaching, rebuking, correcting, training in righteousness. That's that word, training in righteousness, so that the servant of God may be thoroughly equipped for every good work. This is different from punishment. I want you to hear me here. There are two other words in the Bible that are used for punishment. One is penal infliction, punishment, penalty, denotes penal retribution. These are not the words that's being used in this verse. All right? The Bible is not saying every time your kid does something you don't want them to do, smack them with hard consequences. It says instruct. Tell them, if you do this, here are the consequences. And then when they do that, what do? Give them the consequences. We had a rule in our family that there was never punishment for a consequence we didn't lay out. So if we never established it as a rule and didn't let them know what the consequence was, the first infraction was free. Because we hadn't done any training. How do you hold them at fault for something they don't know yet? Right? And since it's not about how much that action made us feel, we didn't feel compelled to punish. But if it's about your happiness, then any infringement upon your happiness deserves punishment. That makes sense? And that's how most parents punish. Right? And kids learn this, right? They're like, I'm going to take mom up to that edge. Right? And they know it, right? Because they know, right? Counting isn't real yet. Right? They're like, I'm going to count to 10. No, it's probably going to be more like 60. So, right? I got a little more room to get pushed for what I want. And they know, and kids learn, okay, when mom's face turns really red, right? When she does this, right? When fists clench and she hunches over, she's serious. Until then, if she's still doing her thing and saying, guys, stop, don't do that, quit fighting, quit bickering, hey, no, don't pull your sister's hair, no, put the scissors down, right? That none of that has consequences to it, does it? No, it's when they push mom over the edge and she throws something down and she comes stomping in the room. Uh-oh, stop. Right? Don't we learn that as kids? right? That it's really not about the behavior, whether it's right or wrong, it's whether or not mom is happy. And so I can do whatever I want as long as we don't push mom past that edge. Kids need admonishment. The word admonish here means words of encouragement that inform and warn with the intent of having someone understand the consequence and avoid it. This is what we're doing. We're encouraging our kids that, hey, here are the consequences. I don't want you to experience these consequences. And so I'm going to warn, right? We had this rule at our house that bickering stops all the fun, right? And so that was the rule. If you bicker, the two of you bicker, it's stopping everybody's fun, including yours, right? I know bickering seems fun right now, but it's going to stop all the fun. And so if our kids were bickering, whatever fun thing we're doing, there was one time we had just walked into SeaWorld. We were like 10 minutes into SeaWorld. And our kids are bickering. They're just going at it. And so I give the warning, right? Are you guys bickering? Because bickering stops all the fun. And they're like, right? And then we keep walking. They're just at each other. I'm like, okay, let's go home. And they're like, wait, what? Right? And for me, I'm in this for $100 already. Right? So this is painful to me. Right? Right? But this is how you train. And we turned around with tears and everything and walked back to the car and went home. No TV, no fun. All right, there's no fun. No books, no nothing. We're just going to sit here and stare at each other because bickering stops all the fun. It wasn't that bad, but, right? And it was painful. It was painful for all of us. Right? And Nan's like, really? Right? Come on, nah. Right? And I'm like, no, we got to hold to our guns. Right? That's admonition. It's the instruction that allows for warning for the purpose of avoiding the consequences. Right? Understanding and avoiding the consequences. That's all I got time for today. Hopefully this was helpful. Remember, the thing you're going to do, I'm going to pray. Jared's going to come up and lead us in a song. Actually, no. Is it okay? It's okay. I went kind of long. All right? And food's out there, right? So I'm going to pray for us, and then as I pray, you're going to turn to the person next to you, and you're going to not say their name, right? You're going to say, hey, remind me what your name is, right? And then you say, oh, yeah, hey, whatever your name was, it was great to meet you today, okay? So, Father, thank you for your word. Thank you that we get to look at things that are so important like parenting from a biblical worldview, and I pray that these truths would sink deep in our hearts and they'd change our approach to raising our kids. May we not be provocative parents, God, but may we be people who honor you, glorify you by raising our kids according to your word. We trust you for it. In Jesus' name, amen. All right.